For 6 straight hours, nothing happened. The outer rim of known space had earned its reputation. Empty, silent, forgotten. No trade lanes crossed here. No empires cared enough to patrol it. Pirates avoided the region because there was nothing worth stealing, and smugglers stayed away because even desperation had limits. Valira had learned all of that during her first week aboard the Corvani scout vessel Twilight Seeker. She was a long-range sensor analyst, and her assignment was painfully simple. Watch the screens, log anomalies, and report anything unusual. Most days, unusual meant background radiation fluctuations or the drifting skeleton of some long-dead ship. This shift felt no different. Valira leaned back in her chair, her 4 amber eyes half-lidded as the display washed the bridge in soft blue light. Space stretched endlessly before her. Cold, quiet, indifferent. Then the console chimed. A single, quiet beep. She almost ignored it. Debris, she muttered to herself, fingers hovering lazily over the controls. Ancient wreckage was common in fringe space, leftovers from forgotten conflicts no one bothered to document anymore. But the blip moved. Valira straightened instantly. Debris drifted randomly, pulled by gravity wells and stellar winds. This object wasn't drifting. It was maintaining a clean vector, straight, deliberate, and accelerating. Her pulse quickened as she zoomed the display. That's not debris. The object speed increased smoothly, far too controlled for junk. Valira initiated a deep scan, routing power from secondary systems as her console worked through known ship profiles across the galaxy. Corvani explorers, Zrexian cruisers, merchant barges, Thraxian warships. No match. The database finished its sweep and displayed the result in stark white text. Unknown configuration. Origin. Terran. Probable. Valira's blood went cold. Terran. Human. That was impossible. Every recorded authority, from the Galactic Concord to the Fringe Archives, listed humanity as extinct. 2 centuries ago, the humans had vanished without warning. Their worlds were empty. Their cities abandoned. Their fleets reduced to silent monuments drifting through space. No distress calls. No final transmission. Just gone. Theories filled the gap where facts should have been. Some believed humans destroyed themselves in one final war. Others claimed they angered something far older and paid the price. The Thraxian Empire, predictably, claimed responsibility, but never produced evidence. Whatever the truth, the conclusion was the same. Humans were dead. Valira ran the scan again. Same result. A third time. Still Terran. Her throat felt dry as she turned toward the command dais. Captain Draenix, she said, keeping her voice steady through effort alone. You need to see this. The captain rose from his chair slowly. Draenix was a veteran. Scarred, disciplined, and rarely surprised. He had survived border wars, pirate ambushes, and disasters that had claimed entire crews. But when he saw Valira's screen, he froze. That can't be right, he said quietly. Humans are extinct. I know, Valira replied. But the signature is consistent. I verified it 3 times. Around them, the bridge crew sensed the shift. Conversations died. Consoles were abandoned as eyes turned toward the main display. Valira projected the data across the bridge. A single point of light moved steadily toward them, growing brighter with each passing second. It's on an intercept course, she added. Straight toward us. The communications officer swallowed hard, his limbs trembling slightly. Captain, orders? Draenix didn't answer immediately. Valira's mind raced as old stories surfaced, tales passed down by elders who remembered humanity not as legends, but as neighbors. Humans were physically unimpressive, the stories said. No claws. No natural armor. Fragile bodies. Short lifespans. But they were survivors. They came from a brutal world that punished weakness, and instead of breaking, they adapted. They expanded faster than anyone predicted, solving problems other species wouldn't dare face. And then, silence. Some traders whispered that human ships still appeared on lonely routes, watching from afar before vanishing. Most dismissed it as spacer nonsense. Valira never had. Captain, she said softly, the ship is slowing. Controlled deceleration. Draenix exhaled slowly, decision settling into place. All hands to stations. Raise shields to full power. Weapons charged, but do not lock targets. He paused, then added, open a general communication channel. All frequencies. The comm officer stared at him. You want to talk to it? If that ship wanted us destroyed, Draenix replied calmly, we wouldn't be having this conversation. Static filled the bridge. Seconds stretched. Then a voice spoke. Clear. Human. Corvani vessel Twilight Seeker. This is Commander Daniel Hayes of the Terran exploration ship Enduring Hope. We have detected your presence and request peaceful contact. The bridge fell silent. Valira stared at the screen, heart pounding. After 200 years of silence, humanity had answered. For several long seconds after the transmission ended, no one on the bridge of the Twilight Seeker spoke. Even the low hum of the ship system seemed quieter, as if space itself were waiting to see what would happen next. A human voice. Not a recording. Not an echo from an ancient databank. Alive. Confident. Captain Draenix was the first to move. He stepped closer to the main display, his posture rigid but controlled. Commander Hayes, he said at last, activating the channel again. This is Captain Draenix of the Corvani scout vessel Twilight Seeker. Your message has been received. He hesitated for a fraction of a second, choosing his words carefully. The Galactic Concord lists your species as extinct for over 2 centuries. Before any further interaction, we require verification of your identity. The silence that followed was brief, but deliberate. Then the human replied, and Valira thought she detected a faint trace of amusement beneath his composed tone. Understood, Captain. Transmitting visual confirmation now. The main view screen flickered. Suddenly, a face filled the display. Valira felt her breath catch. He looked ordinary. Pale skin. Short dark hair, touched with gray at the temples. Deep-set eyes the color of storm clouds. No fangs. No scales. No intimidating biological weapons. Just a human. But there was something else. Something harder to quantify. A quiet confidence in his posture. The relaxed stillness of someone who knew exactly where he stood in the universe. I am Commander Daniel Hayes, the man said. Terran Exploration Corps. Born on Earth, in a region once called Montana. Current age, 53 standard Earth years. Every eye on the bridge was fixed on him. Valira realized she was staring at a living piece of history. A species the galaxy had buried had just stood up and introduced itself. Captain Draenix inclined his head slightly. Your image has been received. We acknowledge your claim. The human nodded. I appreciate your caution. If our positions were reversed, I would demand the same. Before anyone could respond, Valira's sensor console pulsed urgently. Her stomach tightened. Captain, she said, fingers flying across the controls. Multiple warp signatures emerging at the edge of the sector. Draenix turned sharply. Identify. Valira brought the data up on the main display. 4 massive vessels dropped out of warp almost simultaneously. Angular, armored, bristling with weapon arrays. Thraxian warships. A collective murmur rippled across the bridge. The Thraxian Empire does not patrol this region, the communications officer said. They shouldn't be here. Valira swallowed. They're on an intercept trajectory. Toward us. The human commander's expression did not change. Captain Draenix glanced toward the screen. Commander Hayes, it appears your arrival has attracted unwanted attention. Hayes exhaled slowly. Yes, that was anticipated. The Thraxians opened a channel without waiting for permission. Their captain appeared, towering, reptilian, scales darkened with age and battle scars. His yellow eyes burned with contempt. Unknown vessels, the Thraxian snarled. This sector falls under Thraxian authority. Identify yourselves and power down your weapons. Hayes leaned slightly forward, his image now shared between both ships. This is Commander Daniel Hayes of the Terran exploration ship Enduring Hope, he said evenly. I am conducting peaceful diplomatic contact with the Corvani vessel. I request you disengage and withdraw. The Thraxian laughed, a harsh, grinding sound. "Human," he scoffed. "You insult us with obvious lies. Humans are extinct. You are either delusional or bait." He leaned closer to the camera, claws scraping metal. "Surrender your ships. Now." Hayes did not raise his voice. "I won't be doing that," he replied calmly. "And I strongly advise you to turn around." The Thraxian's eyes narrowed. "You threaten the Empire with one ship? I'm offering you a chance to leave without consequences." The channel cut abruptly. Valira's sensors screamed warnings. "They're charging weapons," she reported. "Time to firing range, 8 minutes." The bridge tensed. Shields flared brighter. Weapon systems hummed. Hayes raised his wrist and spoke quietly into a device embedded in his sleeve. "Enduring hope. Execute protocol Shepard. Non-lethal engagement only." A moment later, a calm voice responded. "Acknowledged." The human ship moved. Not fast. Not violently. It simply vanished. Valira's heart slammed against her chest. "Captain, I've lost the Terran vessel. No warp signature. No cloaking field. It's just gone." "Maintain scans," Draenix ordered, though his voice betrayed disbelief. Seconds dragged by. Then, all 4 Thraxian warships broadcast emergency signals at once. Valira's console flooded with alerts. "No engine output," she whispered. "Weapons offline. Command systems locked. They're drifting." Space shimmered. The Enduring Hope reappeared exactly where it had been before. Commander Hayes lowered his wrist. "The Thraxian vessels have been temporarily disabled. No casualties. Their systems will recover in approximately 6 hours." The bridge was utterly silent. Captain Draenix finally spoke. "How?" Hayes met his gaze. "We had time, Captain. And we learned how to use it." Valira stared at the drifting warships on her display. Legends didn't do things like this. Guardians did. The disabled Thraxian warships drifted silently behind them as the Twilight Seeker altered course. Station Centralis, the political heart of the galactic concord, glowed ahead like a jeweled wheel suspended in the void. Thousands of vessels crowded its approach lanes, traffic unusually dense for what should have been a routine cycle. Word had already spread. Humanity was back. Inside the Twilight Seeker, tension clung to every corridor. Crew members whispered openly now, no longer trying to hide their fear or fascination. Valira walked beside Captain Draenix toward the docking bay, her mind replaying the impossible display she had just witnessed. 4 warships. Neutralized. No weapons fired. No lives taken. And the human responsible had looked almost apologetic afterward. The docking clamps engaged with a soft thud. Moments later, the airlock cycled open. Commander Daniel Hayes stepped through alone. He wore no armor, carried no visible weapon. His hands remained relaxed at his sides as if boarding an unfamiliar alien vessel was a perfectly ordinary thing to do. Captain Draenix studied him carefully. "You're placing a great deal of trust in us, Commander." Hayes offered a small smile. "Trust has to start somewhere." They moved to a private briefing chamber, a modest room, functional rather than impressive. Hayes seated himself despite the chair clearly not being designed for human anatomy, adjusting without complaint. Draenix folded his arms. "You've demonstrated extraordinary power. But power alone does not explain where your species has been for 200 years. Hayes' expression sobered. 212 years ago, he began, humanity received a warning. Valira leaned forward. A species known as the Varth detected Earth. Ancient. Incredibly old. They exist mostly in intergalactic voids, places most civilizations never explore. Draenix frowned. "I've never heard of them." "You wouldn't have," Hayes replied. "Most don't, because by the time they're discovered, it's already over." He paused before continuing. The Varth identify civilizations that show rapid technological acceleration, aggressive expansion, and what they define as adaptive resilience. Species that grow stronger under pressure. Valira felt a chill. "Humans." "Yes," Hayes said simply. "We fit their criteria perfectly." Draenix exhaled slowly. "So they attacked you." They intended to, Hayes corrected. We were warned just in time to act. You fought them. No. We ran. The admission surprised Valira. But not in the way you're imagining, Hayes added. Our scientists had been developing theories on folded dimensions. Pocket realities nested within normal space. When the warning came, we had 12 years to turn theory into survival. Drenix's eyes widened slightly. You hid in another dimension. Hayes nodded. When the Varth arrived at Earth, they found nothing. Empty systems. Silent worlds. Valira struggled to process it. You vanished, deliberately. Yes. And stayed hidden for 2 centuries? Hayes' lips curved faintly. For you, yes. For us. Nearly 1,000 years. The room fell completely silent. 1,000, Drenix repeated quietly. Time flows differently in folded space, Hayes explained. 2 centuries here became almost 10 there. Valira's thoughts raced. 1,000 years of uninterrupted development. Of learning. Of preparation. How many survived? She asked softly. Hayes' gaze dropped for the first time. About 3 billion. Out of nearly 12. The number struck like a physical blow. We lost cities. Cultures. Entire populations, he continued. The transition wasn't clean. It was the worst catastrophe in our history. But you survived, Drenix said. Yes. And then we rebuilt. Hayes stood, walking to the viewport. Stars drifted past in slow silence. At first, survival consumed us. Food. Energy. Stability. Then something changed. We realized that if we rebuilt the same civilization that nearly got us exterminated, we'd just repeat the cycle. So you changed yourselves, Valira said. We changed how we used what we already were, Hayes replied. Humans are stubborn, curious, creative. We don't stop pushing limits. Instead of turning those traits inward, we turned them outward. He turned back to face them. We unified. Not perfectly, but enough. Wars became unacceptable luxuries. Innovation became collective. Drenix studied him carefully. And the technology you demonstrated against the Thraxians? A fraction of what we've developed. Valira swallowed. Why return now? She asked. Hayes didn't hesitate. Because the Voth are moving again. The words seemed to dim the room. They've noticed the concord, Hayes continued. The expansion. The population growth. In 50 years they'll arrive. Drenix's claws tightened on the table. And without you? Hayes met his gaze steadily. There will be nothing left to defend. Silence pressed in. Finally, Drenix spoke. You expect us to believe that humanity, long believed extinct, returns just in time to save the galaxy. Hayes nodded. I don't expect belief. I expect caution, skepticism, fear. He paused. But I'm offering proof, technology, and alliance. Not domination. Valira studied him closely. Everything about his demeanor spoke of restraint, not conquest. You could hide again, she said. Let the concord fall. Yes, Hayes admitted. We could. Then why don't you? For the first time, his voice softened. Because we remember what it was like to be alone. Station Centralis had never been this loud. The massive assembly chamber, designed to host calm, measured debate, now echoed with overlapping voices from dozens of species. Representatives shouted in fear, anger, disbelief. Translators struggled to keep up as emotions overrode protocol. Humanity's return had shattered 2 centuries of accepted history. Valira watched from the elevated observation tier, her hands gripping the railing as she scanned the chamber below. Commander Hayes stood near the center floor, flanked by Captain Drenix and several Concord security officers. Despite the chaos, Hayes remained still, composed, as if waiting for the storm to exhaust itself. Finally, High Arbiter Zolanik raised his staff. The sound it made, a deep harmonic pulse, cut through the chamber. Silence followed, reluctant but complete. Commander Hayes, the Arbiter said, his aged voice steady. The Concord has reviewed the sensor data recorded by the Twilight Seeker. The disabling of 4 Thraxian warships without loss of life has been verified. A ripple moved through the hall. However, Zolanik continued, extraordinary claims demand extraordinary justification. You vanished without warning. You allowed the galaxy to mourn a dead species. Now you return with warnings of ancient annihilators and offers of protection only you can provide. His eyes narrowed slightly. Many find this concerning. Hayes inclined his head. That concern is justified. The admission caught several delegates off guard. We left in fear, Hayes continued. We were focused solely on survival. In doing so, we failed every ally and neutral world that once counted us among the living. A murmur spread again, this time surprise. We cannot undo that choice, Hayes said. But we can acknowledge it. Humanity owes the Concord an apology. Valira felt her chest tighten. A powerful species apologizing publicly was almost unheard of. A Thraxian delegate rose abruptly, scales bristling. Apologies mean nothing. Your ship humiliated our fleet. How do we know you won't turn that power on the rest of us? Hayes turned to face him without hostility. You don't, he said plainly. Not yet. The Thraxian snarled. Then why should we trust you at all? Hayes took a slow breath. Because if humanity intended conquest, this chamber wouldn't exist anymore. The room went deathly quiet. We could have emerged from hiding and ruled through fear, Hayes continued. We chose not to. Power does not grant moral authority. It only reveals who you truly are. Zolanik studied him intently. And who does humanity believe itself to be? Hayes' gaze swept the chamber. Guardians. The word echoed. We learned something during our isolation, Hayes said. Strength used only for self-preservation leads to stagnation. Strength used to protect others gives purpose. Another representative rose. A soft-voiced aquatic species. If the Varth are real, why target us now? Because you've grown, Hayes replied. The Concord is no longer insignificant. That makes you visible. And if we refuse your help? Another delegate demanded. Hayes nodded once. Then humanity will respect that choice. Valira frowned. You'd walk away, the delegate pressed. We would continue preparing, Hayes said. And we would intervene only if the Vartha's actions threatened our own survival. It wasn't comforting, but it was honest. High Arbiter Zolanik leaned back slowly. You ask us to trust a species that vanished, evolved beyond our comprehension, and returned claiming only it can save us. Hayes spread his hands. I ask you to trust evidence, not claims. We are prepared to share technology, defensive systems, early warning networks, training. A pause. And if this is a lie? The Arbiter asked. Hayes met his gaze. Then you'll be strong enough to stop us. The chamber erupted again, this time with conflicted voices rather than outrage. After long deliberation, Zolanik raised his staff once more. The Concord will not decide today, he announced. But humanity will be granted provisional observer status. Further cooperation will be evaluated. Hayes bowed slightly. That is all we ask. As the session adjourned, Valira stepped away from the gallery, her thoughts heavy. Later, standing alone at an observation window, she watched the human fleet beyond the station. Dozens of dark, elegant ships holding position with quiet patience. They weren't posturing. They weren't demanding. They were waiting. Commander Hayes joined her silently. You're wondering if we're telling the truth, he said. Yes, Valira admitted. That's fair. She glanced at him. Are you afraid? He smiled faintly. Every day. Then why stand between the galaxy and something ancient enough to erase stars? Hayes looked out into the darkness. Because someone has to. The first warning arrived 3 days later. Valira was back at her sensor station aboard the Twilight Seeker, now docked alongside Station Centralis. Traffic around the station had increased nearly tenfold as fleets from across the Concord repositioned themselves, some in preparation, others in panic. She was reviewing deep space telemetry when her console abruptly shifted colors. Red. Not an error. Not interference. A pattern. Her breathing slowed as she isolated the signal. The data did not come from normal space. It wasn't warp residue, subspace turbulence, or gravitational lensing. came from between. Captain, Valira said quietly, forcing her voice steady. I'm detecting something new. Captain Draenix was beside her instantly. Define new. Valira pulled the data up on the shared display. Mass distortions across multiple intergalactic vectors. Extremely faint, but synchronized. Commander Hayes stepped forward, eyes narrowing. They're probing, he said. The word landed like a weight. The Varth? Draenix asked. Hayes nodded once. They don't move blindly. They test reality before committing. How long? Valira asked. Hayes studied the display. 50 years was the estimate. Now, he exhaled. Closer. Within hours, the Concord convened an emergency council. This time, the shouting was replaced by fear. Representatives demanded answers. Real ones. Not reassurances. Not philosophy. Hayes stood before them again, joined now by Ambassador Catherine Bell. She was older than Hayes, silver-haired, her expression calm but unyielding. The probes you're detecting are not attacks, Bell said. They're confirmations. The Varth are verifying that this galaxy contains life worth erasing. A representative trembled. Can we stop them? Bell did not hesitate. Yes. Hope rippled through the chamber. But not alone, she added. She activated a holographic projection. Space unfolded above the council floor, layered with unfamiliar structures. Vast defensive arrays, energy lattices, gravitational anchors. These systems were designed over centuries, Bell explained. They disrupt the methods the Varth use to enter normal space. Another delegate leaned forward. You're giving this to us? Yes, Bell replied. Open source. No restrictions. The chamber erupted, this time in disbelief. Why? Someone demanded. Bell's voice softened. Because survival shouldn't be proprietary. Training began almost immediately. Human engineers worked alongside Concord scientists, translating concepts that bent known physics into something usable. Defensive platforms were seated along key corridors. Early warning networks stretched beyond the galactic edge. Valira watched it all unfold, her respect growing with every cycle. Humans didn't command. They collaborated. Weeks later, the first full breach attempt occurred. Alarms screamed across multiple systems as space itself warped violently. A region near an uninhabited system collapsed inward, reality thinning like torn fabric. Human fleets moved instantly, not toward the breach, but around it. Why aren't they attacking? A Concord officer demanded. Hayes answered calmly. Because attacking feeds them. The defensive grid activated. Space stabilized. The breach collapsed. Nothing emerged. The room went silent. We just stopped them, someone whispered. Hayes nodded. This time, celebration was muted. Humans didn't cheer. They'll adapt, Hayes warned. They always do. Months turned into years. The Varth tested again and again, each attempt more aggressive, more complex. And each time the galaxy held. Not because of humanity alone, but because the Concord stood together. Valira rose through the ranks, eventually overseeing a sector-wide sensor array built using human principles. For the first time in recorded history, the galaxy watched the darkness, rather than fearing it unseen. One quiet cycle, Valira stood beside Hayes at the observation deck. Do you ever regret coming back? She asked. He considered the question. No, he said. Regret would mean we chose wrong. And if the Varth break through someday? Hayes smiled, not bravely, but honestly. Then they'll learn something new. She raised an eyebrow. What? That this galaxy isn't prey anymore. The galaxy changed slowly at first. There was no single moment when fear vanished or certainty replaced doubt. Progress came in small, deliberate steps. New defense platforms activated, shared fleets trained together, old rivalries set aside out of necessity rather than trust. But beneath it all, something fundamental had shifted. For the first time in known history, the Concord was not reacting to an existential threat. It was preparing for one. Valira stood in the primary sensor hub orbiting the galactic rim, a structure that would not exist without human design principles. The array stretched for thousands of kilometers,
its instruments peering not just into space, but into the fragile seams between realities. Where once the void had been silent, now it was watched. She reviewed the latest reports. Varth probes had ceased entirely along 3 major vectors. The creatures that erase civilizations were hesitating. Confirmed withdrawal patterns, her assistant reported. They're avoiding monitored regions. Valira allowed herself a slow breath. Fear had taught the galaxy to hide. Humanity had taught it to stand. Below the station, joint fleets patrolled. Sleek human vessels interwoven with Concord designs. Technology had blended in unexpected ways. Where human systems were precise and overwhelming, Concord ingenuity added adaptability and scale. Not conquerors, partners. Years later, the Concord convened once more at Station Centralis. This time, the chamber was calm. High Arbiter Zolanik, older but steadier than ever, addressed the assembly. For centuries, he said, we believed strength meant survival of the most ruthless. Humanity has demonstrated another truth, that strength tempered by restraint can reshape destiny. He turned toward Ambassador Bell and Commander Hayes. The Concord formally recognizes humanity not as observers, nor as overseers, but as equals. The chamber responded with unified acknowledgement, a sound that echoed far beyond the station. Valira watched from the gallery, her eyes stinging slightly. Legends rarely lived up to their stories. Humans had surpassed them. Later, alone with Hayes on the observation deck, she finally asked the question that had lingered since first contact. Why didn't you tell us everything at once? Hayes smiled faintly. Because fear closes minds. Hope opens them. She nodded. Do you think the Varth are gone for good? No, Hayes admitted. They don't forget. They just recalculate. And if they return? He looked out at the stars, at the defenses, the fleets, the living proof of unity. Then they'll find something they've never encountered before. What's that? A galaxy that refuses to break. The sensor alarms chimed softly. Routine now, not panic. Valira glanced at the display. Another probe retreated. Hayes chuckled quietly. They're learning. Far beyond monitored space, in the dark between galaxies, ancient intelligences withdrew their attention. The cost had become uncertain. The prey had grown teeth and conscience. For the first time in eons, inevitability had been challenged. Humanity did not announce victory. They simply stayed. Valira reflected on how the stories would be told one day. Not of gods descending from the stars. Not of warriors burning worlds. But of a species that vanished, returned wiser, and chose to stand between the darkness and everyone else. The old tales had warned. Humans are dangerous. They were right. But they had forgotten the second half. Humans decide how that danger is used. As the fleets moved in quiet formation and the galaxy breathed a little easier, Valira allowed herself a small, genuine smile. The legend was real. And this time, it was on their side.